Welcome back to the last session, the roundtable. This is literally a roundtable. 360 degree. The good thing about roundtable is that we see each other face to face. The other one about roundness is to the so-called harmony. But in fact, it can be harmony. So I think it is something to do with equality. That is the idea. It is time for everyone to speak up. I don't expect it to be harmony, though. Yesterday and today, we talk about the lightness and also the gravity of comparative studies and global studies. We have talked about, the unit of analysis ranging from the global to the movement to urban graffiti. And we have, clashes of ideas, and also we agree on something. Bill has set us, a challenge. You come in at the right time. Yesterday, and then he said, can we, set out the directions for comparative study? That is really a challenge, if not an impossible task. So, probably we can start out in this direction. And with all the, debates and, comments, it seems that, there are three basic questions. One is, why compare? Why to compare? The second has to do with how to compare. And the third one is, what is to compare? And this, we can talk about this. It can be debased. It can be destructive creation. We started out with deconstruction by Collins, and then he also tried to construct something. And then we can repeat that process over here, trying to form the new directions for comparative studies. So this is an opportunity for us to pick each other's brain and come up with something.
Are we designing a new project?
The Roundtable project, yes, Ingrid.
Yeah, thank you very much, and let me say that I greatly enjoyed this conference, and thank you to organizers, to the student helpers, to everyone who made this such a pleasant experience, I think, for all of us, and I think maybe we should just give them a clap.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyway, what I really wanted to raise is I've led a few international projects across continents, and what I came across in each of them is that we have the similar methodologies, we understand about sampling or multi-stage sampling and all that, but I think we have different methodologies, and I found that the greatest challenge of my international projects. Yes, we had colleagues who got along very well, but we have different traditions of methodologies, and I think that's a bit what we heard today about commensurability. We need enough space to be able to address these differences and not leveling out the differences, but rather explore the differences and identify the fine lines of differences which could then be built into the research project. And I think this, what you said at the end, what to compare, I think that should be the first question, and that should be the methodological issue, which I feel we haven't maybe sufficiently addressed in these days, but we can always do it some other time. But I think that, in my view, was and is still, now I'm doing a big project on climate change communication here in Asia and actually in Europe, and we face the same problem, how people understand the research project in so many different ways, and well, we all come from different traditions, and that's what I just want to raise, because I feel that is really, really crucial. A second thing I would like to say is we've spoken about quantitative, qualitative research, but as we all know, there are a number of new, very challenging methods, big data analysis, network analysis, those sorts of things where we don't have apples and oranges anymore, but we are involved with one big fruit basket, actually, and we pick and choose. So I think those are the challenges also we need to address. And when we think about forming a sort of comparative network, I'm not so sure if the term comparative still works in those sorts of research environments. But something like that needs to be addressed as well, because that is really, specifically when training students today, that's really will become crucial methodologies in the future. So I think those are the two issues I would like to raise.
Yeah, I also want to follow up with two issues. But first, clarification. Yesterday, later on, people have been talking to me saying, your idea about the apples and oranges are getting popular. It's not my idea, okay? It's the idea from James Benninger, okay? I sent the chapter by James Benninger to a couple of people. But if others want to read the original piece where this idea came from, email me, okay? I can share that. More substantively, I want to talk about number one, networks, and number two, money. Okay. And for networks, I want people to, because I'm a member of the ICA Membership and Internationalization Committee, and ICA had a major change for its way to do internationalization. Okay, in the past, it's the regional at-large members, a few people who were supposed to represent all the communication researchers in Asia. I think Australia is put strangely with Africa as one world region, okay, and you have to represent everything from popular culture to policy research. But then the bylaw change from last year, okay, is to have every division will have their own international liaisons, okay. But my committee, okay, is working very hard these days to facilitate the discussion of what should this this division level liaisons do, okay, and so there will be this discussion is going on, and also in Puerto Rico we will have a blue sky workshop. So it's with open door, everyone can come after the workshop. There will be a reception too, okay, to have as widely as possible, but at the division level, so it's closer to everyone's interest. So that's one thing I want to people to hope people can help ICA more and help myself included. And the harder question is about money, okay? And I think this came out from the last panel, okay? Several people, but this is too big a can of worms. I did not open earlier, but I want to open it now. I want to have more data about exactly how much are the different research, okay, foundations, agencies are investing into this comparative area. I don't have scientific data, but I have some anecdotal data. I was reviewing ESRC, the largest European foundation, and I'm not going to say which fund, but it involves comparing parts of Asia with parts of Europe, and that's one proposal is 2.5 million euros, okay. And here in Hong Kong, what we call GRF, General Research Funds, okay. And for writing about the same amount of words, okay, the intellectual work to do that, you get probably $250,000 Hong Kong dollars, okay? If we put it, it's 1%, okay? So I don't know to what extent, this is, is 2.5 million too large for the, Hong Kong, for the European, or I just want people who know data so that we can, when next time we talk to, or Yan talk to, okay, Yan probably have high chance to talk to the real power who control money investment, so that we can give them comparative data on this. And another thing about from the previous panel, okay, and even earlier, we heard, again and again, I heard, okay, is the U.S. is not investing a lot into in comparative research, which does not seem to be my experience. Okay, of course, the early, four theories, came from funding. Okay, it's a religious background. Okay, which probably explains why it's not too social scientific. But also, for example, national development and communication. Okay, the U.S. AID. I think when Yan talk about the coming back of the modernization paradigm, there has to be money, in that research. Okay, and I know the IDRC, Canadian, is also very active in investing into ICTD, in Asia as well. And also the SSRC, okay, Dr. Chen and I, we talk about that, okay, they are the group of people who started the Inter-Asia, okay, so mostly these are regional studies, okay, and from even political science and IR, and now they're including communication media. So I think there are major, okay, sources. I just want to have a fact checked, okay, maybe there are other major American initiatives out there, and that we need to be factored in the institutional structure of, financially supporting comparative research.
I'd like to make a couple points. Maybe I'll take the last one first, the funding issue. And it obviously is an extremely difficult problem, and I think the European structure is designed better than any other that I'm aware of to make these kinds of projects possible. But I want to mention something very specific. It seems to me, from my experience, and I'm sure others have the same, that the cost of doing the same kind of research in different countries varies tremendously. When we were doing our television news, foreign news on television study, I was flabbergasted by the amount of money that Thomas, for example, raised in Switzerland and in Germany, the colleagues in Germany got, compared to the money that we had in Israel and a few others, because the cost of various things is so different in the various countries. The amount of money that graduate assistants get paid varies tremendously and so on. So cost is an issue. And ideally, but I think hardly ever accomplishable, if that's a word, is to get central funding like the European. I can just, as an anecdote, say that when we were trying to get our study organized, I approached a colleague who is a big shot at CNN and proposed to him that CNN would fund our entire project. And he laughed and he said, why should we do that? I said, well, because we're friends and because we, and you find interest in television news around the world and so on. And he said, well, no, we can't do that. But then what he did is transfer or suggested that I speak with someone at CNN International. And they were willing to fund a small part of the Israeli part of the study, but not the entire thing. Why? Because we are friends, okay? So friendship sometimes does lead to getting funds, but that's really not the way to go. But friendship brings me to my second point, which I think is a also serious point. When one designs or wants to design a comparative international global whatever study, which countries ought to be involved? Now, ideally, the whole United Nations should be part of this, of course, but that's not realistic. Joseph, you mentioned before the study that was done by your student, currently your colleague, comparing Hong Kong and the United States. Now, of course, that's fine. But the question is, what's the rationale for comparing those two little countries, not little, the small country and the big country, okay? When we're talking about these large studies, we're dealing essentially with larger numbers of countries. And then the question becomes, which countries do we select? Unfortunately, most of my experience, and I think that of many others, has been those colleagues who are available and willing to join in the project. It's not that we do a random choice of countries. That's impossible. It's not that we have some kind of theoretical notion of looking for these types of countries, but we just pick what we can and hope to do the best. And what I want to propose is, I don't know how to do this, but if we can come up with a way of finding the right model for selecting countries, mainly, and then we talked about this yesterday, mainly in order not to look for differences so much, because differences are easy to find, but to look for universals. for commonalities, or the extent to which there are commonalities and differences. So the selection of the sample of countries, I think, is critical in doing this kind of research. And I don't have an answer, and I don't know if anyone has one, but we should try to work on what kind of model can be established to create the best kind of sample of countries for this kind of research, comparative research. I think that's a very difficult issue, but something that has to be done if we want to really make generalized statements about whatever we're doing.
I think we shouldn't do that. I think it's too contentious to try to develop a project, and that's too specific. I think remember the big picture is this is your 50th anniversary. And it's like, what are you going to do for the next 50 years? And what clearly, it seems to me that the big charge or challenge is to enlarge comparative research. And you can enlarge it in a couple of ways. One is not just privileged nations as a unit of analysis. Nations are fine and they will remain a unit of analysis, but you must go beyond the nation state. And people have given examples of comparing events, comparing institutions across, comparing all sorts of things are potential units of analysis, not just in the nation state. And also being more global. Partly that's not just being focused on the West or Western models, but I think the way of putting it in terms of what nations do we look at is just as global as possible. And the other was Ingrid mentioned and others about being more methodologically eclectic and open so that we're not just survey research, but case studies and big data analysis, web metrics, where we can actually look globally. And so I think this kind of expanding comparative research, both methodologically and as objects of analysis and units of analysis, and should be the big, we come out of this conference with a real agenda for moving comparative research forward. But I think if you get involved in designing a project or who's going to be involved in it, that's too, you won't get very far.
Thanks. Somebody mentioned my name, so I feel obliged to say something. If you're looking for a list of funding agencies, I'm not saying that I have that list, but I can contribute to such a list because that's all available. So it's not an issue of not knowing the funding agencies, it's an issue of getting the money from the funding agencies. And that's not so easy because you need networks, you need to come up with a convincing story to convince them that you're worth their money. And that has sometimes to do with academic intelligence, but most often with bureaucracy and all these circumstantial issues. So and lobbying, of course. I have been working in different environments. I have been successful at sometimes, and sometimes very frustrating and disappointed. So I don't have the golden rule to chair here, but what Europe has been mentioned as an ideal or a case to follow. I would rather say let's have some second thoughts about what has happened in Europe, because it may have started off in an interesting way, but it has basically become pretty stuck into old-fashioned bureaucratic and nepotistic kind of networks. Okay, what I would like to contribute in a more positive way, I think that from an academic perspective, we can always identify what is needed, a unit of analysis, the right methodology or not. But if we want to conceptualizing something which is relevant not only for us as academics, but for the larger world out there, which normally starts questioning us about what is your value, why do we support either public or private institutions. And there are a lot of private institutions being built up these days, and they are becoming more and more our competitors because they can deliver the goods in less time and with less overhead than academics and universities can. So there is a very competitive world emerging, if not already there. So we rather ask ourselves what is from the collective knowledge we gather as academics, what should be the priority which unites us and which we have the capacity to address, and then we need to add that into a marketing strategy, how to sell this to those people who have the money. Sometimes it can end up in a very sophisticated, very still pure academic way, with us not having to negotiate and give in on our privileges and principles. Sometimes you need to dirty the waters and become rather political in the sense of this. And let me just so you need to come up with a concept and with a strategy which is sellable. I'm sorry to say, and I'm the last one who likes to do that myself, but that's how it works these days, unfortunately. But let me take an example I'm currently involved in. Ingrid said something about global warming and climate change. You may not like to hear this, but the World Bank has prioritized this issue and has already for a couple of years established partnerships with different universities and different research institutions under the slogan of Connect for Change, C for C. If you want to Google it, you'll get on the website, you'll get Facebook and all these things. Now they have, they of course have been going on for a while, but they now start reaching the point of what are we doing? So there's the question, how is this, is there any impact, is there any result? Initially, of course, they thought by launching all these different multimedia projects, prices for filmmakers and commercial advertisements and the long-lasting discussion groups, etc. Now they are asking themselves what is the impact of all of this. So if you have an interest in global change, if you have an interest in environmental communication, and if you want to position that in a needs situation context, then I think there is a future for us networking towards that objective. Whether it will get successful, that's of course not for me to assess, but I think that's a way forward. So the last sentence I want to utter is, we need to ask ourselves the right questions before we can formulate something which we agree on.
There's a few. What did I want to say? I think that expanding comparative research doesn't necessarily mean to expand its scope, its scale. Expanding its scope, it's always good, but not necessarily the scale. So we should probably get less obsessed with numbers of countries, because it's not necessarily true that the more countries we have, the more we learn, and I would like to see more qualitative and comparative case studies, because some of the best work And some of the really groundbreaking work, for instance, in political science, is based on a comparison of 2 or 3 contexts. So, and that would also not necessarily resolve the question of getting funding, but it would help to make it much easier. And second of all, well, I think it's always nice to have comparative research, but comparison does not have a value in itself. So we should always be very carefully looking into the effort and benefits. So we need to justify the massive effort that goes into a comparative study. I'm spending most of my time with managing a large comparative project. I'm going after people who disappear with the money. I'm checking on data files which have, which we have problems with forged data, for instance. So it's a lot of effort that goes into comparative research. So we should actually really look into what is the added value of comparison. So what do we gain in conceptual terms and empirically from comparison that we might not get if we do a non-comparative study. So essentially we need to justify the additional effort that goes into comparative research.
Because I think we're talking past each other a bit in the sense that I'd like to distinguish between sort of a vision of a program of research that happens over years, if not decades, and a study. And I couldn't agree with you more that a study has to be limited in terms of the number of units or the resources you have. But I thought we should be talking about a program of research, a vision of a program of research, of expanding comparative research. And you don't want to have a program of research over 10 years that you'd end up studying only 2 countries, all right? You need to have a program that over time you really expand the range of, and you're more global in that sense. I'm not arguing for a single study, and I don't think we should talk about what study we should do. We should talk about a program of research that would be a wide range of studies over a long period of time, and that's the kind of vision that your department could have. Yeah.
Probably I shouldn't add anything because I'm coming somewhere between the two, but I will do anyway for gender balance purposes. But I actually wanted to return to point the finger at you in the nicest way that, when you, through the idea of the mandate, let's come up with a mandate. I think this is a mandate that for me also it could be inspiring, thinking ahead of your 50 years, but perhaps our 50 years of doing comparative research. Because obviously we'll be doing, we can't predict what will happen in 20 years, let alone in 50 years. But one thing that we know is that we are becoming more interconnected, or our interconnections present more and more challenges. And I just wanted to think along these lines, if there is something that, you take with this great initiative, I think, of bringing all these inspiring ideas here, and hopefully we can take home, is about the what kind of vision we have. And I just wanted to add something that unfortunately Thomas stole my idea. You mentioned an approach that perhaps is more diverse in terms of methodologies, more diverse in defining the units of analysis, but also more diverse, as you said, in defining scale. So it's not just about not thinking big, but also I think of thinking of scale in different ways, in the same way that perhaps we have to think of the global and the comparative in different ways. So comparisons and globally informed research can happen in all different ways. It can be small ethnographic studies all the way to 50-country comparisons. And I think this is very important. And if, again, depending on what kind of questions we need to ask, I think we need to diversify these categories. In the same way that I think we haven't actually discussed how we need to problematize or deconstruct the concept of communication. We don't, obviously, when we talk about communication, we don't talk only about mass media. I'm sure everybody agrees, but actually a lot of our research still assumes that it's the same thing. Communication is not even digital media. Communication can be all of the above: mass media, digital media, interpersonal communication, urban communication. Okay, so in a way, I think it's this kind of, sometimes it's through that deconstruction that we get into the construction of the new, or the new vision. And perhaps then our mapping, Clement's mapping, will include fewer white men and more different kinds of people doing all different kinds of things.
Yeah, I completely agree with Miriam regarding the last point. I also want to go back to Akiba's question on selection of countries, right? When we did our multi-nation study, we started from theoretical framework and sampling, right? We want countries with low, high, medium ICT penetration level, so not so liberal, very liberal in the region, right? But I agree with you that the reality is very challenging. We didn't end up getting all the countries we wanted because of the unavailability of researchers in certain countries. We lost the researcher in Sri Lanka. That part of the study was never done. So the point I also want to make, and which resonates with Mira's point, is when we select countries, can we select countries that need the most research training? Or you don't really see researchers in these countries. Through including people from these countries into my multi-nation project, we probably would be able to train 1 or 2 researchers who can work on their countries in the future on their own, right? So one of our collaborators, a Bangladeshi collaborator, actually went to Australia to do a PhD after he finished this study for us, right? So I think, we are fortunate to be here present, right? When I think about my collaborators, they wouldn't have a chance to sit here, right? But these are the people who need the most research support, and their countries need the most effort to know more about these countries, right? So this would be, you can see this as a diversity of researchers, a diversity of scholar background in that sense, right? So that's it.
Okay, to pick up on Bill's point, this is our 50th anniversary. We have a C Center. So why don't we make use of our C Center to do something, to take some action? For example, we can, not only our colleagues, but within this room or even outside of this room, we can have our center used as a hub so that ideas and partners are called for, so that if you want to do something, you want to find a partner, or you want to see what is going on, who is doing what, can I join? Something like that. We can make use of our C Center like a website. We can have a forum to discuss comparative research, since our center is about comparative research, so that we can start something small but real, and then see what comes out from this kind of small effort.
How much money do we have?
It doesn't cost any money. It's just a website.
So no, we don't even need a website. I think Clement is talking about like a mailing list. Yeah, it's how many people want a mail, because I'm on many mailing lists. Some of them are more useful than others. But like, I don't know, I think Bill and I were all on the AOIR list is very good. The AIR list, the Internet Researcher list. Like every beginning of the semester, people are asking, what are the reading materials you can suggest to me? Okay, and then graduate students are asking questions how to mine data from Facebook. Okay, and then but then do people need this? How many people need this? Raise his hand. Raise our hand. So Dr. Chen is out of the room. We can tell him we will start a mailing list. Okay. But feel free to unsubscribe if you don't find it useful enough. But it's a small challenge.
I just want to come back on this general sense that people in Hong Kong seem to have, that they're very, very poor. First of all, the huge grant you're talking about, in the countries that you're discussing, half of it will get taken away immediately by the university. Yeah? Secondly, you will have to hire people. Now, in Hong Kong, actually, I remember when I came here, after about 9 months, this doctoral student of mine came up to me and said, "Please, Professor Sparks, do you hate me?" I said, "No, I don't hate you." "Well, you never asked me to do anything for you. Can't you give me some research to do?" Now, that would not happen in Europe, I assure you. Yeah? You would be obliged to hire a full-time researcher. So, first of all, you get much more bang for your buck here. You get lots of either cheap or free labour. That's just the reality of, it's one of the things about Chinese culture, to use that term. that doctoral students are either very keen to do it for nothing, or they're very keen to do it for very, very small sums of money. So, $1,000 goes a long way in Hong Kong. Yeah? Secondly, your chances of getting a grant in Hong Kong are much, much higher. The SRC in Britain, for example, and even more the European Union, you've got a chance of well under 1 in 10. Yeah? Where in Hong Kong, even in a university whose research record is not exactly distinguished, I won't name the university, you've got a chance of about 1 in 3. So it's much, much higher. That's the sort of, 1 in 3 is the sort of figure that the physicists and the computer scientists get in Europe. The social scientists getting 1 in 8, 1 in 10, 1 in 12. Here, social scientists, 1 in 3, on average. And lastly, the funders basically operate in response mode. That's to say, they put out a call for papers saying, "What would you like to research?" And you write a report, or you write a research proposal, and either they fund it because it's good or they don't fund it. Yeah? Now, obviously, there'll be political questions involved. You get a 3.5 fundable, but you don't get the money, or blah, 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 blah. And nobody knows how this number is arrived at anyway. But yes, there are political factors. But compared with, let's say, the European Union, which produces these huge framework documents, which try to direct research in the most precise sort of way that they want. This here it's much, much more open. Or the SRC in Britain, which dreams up projects which it thinks are important, and will devote most of its funds to that. That's not the case in Hong Kong. So I think that if you're honest about the situation for academics, everywhere it's bad, but in Hong Kong it's very much better than in the places that you're looking to as being nirvana. And there's simply, money is much easier to come by here. I see Jan nodding his head.
Well, for Colin, not for me. And I am actually a little afraid of big money coming my way, okay? Because I don't have that many willing people to provide free labor to me, okay? Maybe I'm not as handsome, But then I'm not persuaded, because the difference I'm talking about is from between 1 and 100. Okay, if the difference I'm talking about is between 1 and 5, okay, I will pretty much agree with you. But then with that, I think there's the atomization. Okay, even though there are lots of factors. Okay, I think wages are lower. Okay, and there's a reason. I think the European bureaucracy has. Probably we can spend. I haven't spent enough time, but it's more of a social democratic, problem. So there's that element, And then in Hong Kong, it's like small, laissez-faire. And let me, admit, I know Hong Kong is a lot better to other Asian societies, Just now, when you talk about Sri Lanka, but. Our, agenda, one of them is called theoretical advancement, In order for us to do theoretical work, in my past experience of running big grants is I have to end up lots of things. I see some colleagues nodding my hand. You are not as handsome, either. And it's like we have to spend lots of time to do the non-theoretical. To do the empirical, to process the receipts, to sign the things, and then. So I think there needs to be in terms of just now we talk about theoretical, methodological, eclecticism. And we need to have more eclectic, ways to fund, and this GRF, okay, I am applying now, okay, so don't tell the GRF people now. I think the institutional framework they're using are limiting ambitious, okay, scholarly work in this in Hong Kong, and that framework needs to be okay, especially when we talk about theoretical advancement.
I agree with a lot of things that have been said before. First off, I think at the end of the day, if we really start thinking about projects that can be put into practice, I think it will be very much interest-based, I think, and eventually also, I don't think we will come, and maybe we don't have to come to an agreement or what we mean by comparative research, but I think the interest-based, also peer-to-peer network will be as important as it has been before. And just two examples of how to go about these projects. I completely agree with Jack. That these institutionalized frames, and that's not only Hong Kong, but Europe as well. If you apply for the Netherlands Science Foundation, you have a similar problem that if you're based here, you cannot be a full PI, basically. But I think some of these networks that we already have at our institutions and maybe don't use as much, I don't know, but you in the past, I have not, and I now pay attention. There are these collaborative schemes, and CUHK is very keen on, as you've heard before, on internationalizing. So we have actually, we can apply for a week each year where we can visit pre-selected institutions. They are, of course, pre-selected by CUHK to make sure we are staying in the realm of the yeah. And so we can actually go and go to certain places to have these face-to-face meetings, and maybe something like that exists at your institution as well. This is one way to go, and I had a collaboration where a person I've never met before from Utrecht approached me, interest-based, and we have been writing a grant together and try to include other people. So I think this is one of the more kind of mainstream ways to go. Other experiences, and I think this idea of training other researchers who are not as privileged as we are currently, it's a very important one as well. And we have had like a center for dialogue that we founded in the past, and we had conferences, we put up a website, and through this website we actually have reached people that are fantastic researchers in Jakarta and in India, and who we would probably not meet like that. They were young researchers, and they just through this website said, hey, who are you? Here's my research, can we get in contact? And now we are trying to coordinate and work on projects together. But I think it is important to get to regions that are completely underprivileged in that.
Just laying this out to you would be maybe to have different hubs in different parts of the world, like comparative, like exactly what you're doing here. We could replicate that in Melbourne, and then maybe somebody else could do that in South America or maybe in Kenya, so that we have a sort of hub network we could then build on when we are developing projects. Returning to Akiba's issue and other issues, but I think we need to set up a sort of structure in a way. I don't know, I don't think we can do this here and now, but I think that could be something I could definitely do in Melbourne, for example, and have a sort of hub, and you have a hub here, and we can start collaborating, then build others in over time, something like that, because also, I mentioned, social network analysis before, but what I talked about this morning is really honestly social media and the way how social media are globalized sort of new dimensions of communication, but we need to also understand the vertical structures, how they are built into local cultures, and coming back to cultures and urban places Miria talked about. So I think there are lots of a new research agenda being out there, which we couldn't really tackle from this traditional one place in the world is responsible for this and that, but we can only tackle if we are really collaborating. So I think that could be something I can propose here, and I, of course, need to talk to our dean and whoever to make this work. But I think Melbourne is also internationalizing and understands itself as a world university, actually, and I think it would be good to have this form of hubs as well.
Before we close, I wanted to just remind people, well, you may not know this, but across the world in Leeds, England, Jay Blumler is going to have a festschrift, I think in a day or two. Is it the 9th, I believe? And anyway, I couldn't go because I'm obviously here. But I will definitely let him know that he was widely cited at this conference. And he's sort of one of the fathers of comparative communication research. And they're celebrating his career, which has been quite long and illustrious. So it'd be interesting. If you want, I could certainly convey from the conference that he was mentioned. And
probably we should send him the.
I wonder if we could do something.
Yeah, take my paper out.
Please do. Please do. Yeah, and we'll do it too.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. He'd be very touched. Yeah.
But to follow up on Ingrid's, I think one model I've been seeing, for example, Scandinavian countries and China, they have this alternate every 3 years they do a gender. And last year I was involved in doing the gender and media, conference. If we can do it every 3 years, and then the next time we go either Melbourne or Sao Paulo or so, and then we have a rhythm, okay, and doing this, and rather than waiting another 30 years, okay, and but then with the open, okay, people can use our mailing list. By the way, Dr. Chen, when you were out, we decided to start a mailing list. We can decide. I know Akiba and you, okay, competed to host ICA for once, so people can compete more to host the future CCR hub, events.
I was very rarely served so well as at this conference, because I began with saying that we have no theory, and that statement was absolutely confirmed throughout the 2 days. It was a bit undermined today, thanks to Ingrid and Mirja, and a little more also by Georgette and Christine. But I still found it very interesting that I heard a lot of research and a lot of comparisons without any theoretical background, without any help as to understand why there are similarities and why there are differences. And I think we really ought to be careful to define our role. Are we really going to conduct science? Then we really need theoretical reflection, or are we going to do the game of applied arts? There's nothing wrong with that. That's what they do in the medical field all the time. I mean, I look at a lot of medical PhD theses this day, which is an abominable kind of task. Because they don't do in theory. They do applied arts, which is interesting. That gets them along, but gets them a lot of funding, actually, because people want to know whether it works, not why it works. So, but we have to seriously reflect on this. I also think that we have to be a little less, and further exercise a little less cavalier with the terms we use. I heard all these common buzzwords being used, network, social change, democracy, without any clarity as to whether they meant anything at all. I think that if we take ourselves seriously, we have to be a bit more careful there. I also heard a lot of silly questions, and I was very pleased with that, because they indeed, will get very silly answers. But I was very pleased to hear that today I heard the silliness which I really like. Because that's the silliness that reminds me of the White Queen in Alice in Wonderland. When the White Queen says, I can think the impossible. When I had your age, she says to Alice, I thought 5 impossible things before breakfast. And I think your project is thinking the impossible. So I think you should get the White Queen Award for your work. Yeah. Well, and anyway, thanks very much for convening this conference. And to Jack, if you really want to have an international environment, join the IEMCR. Why hanging on with the ICA?
I've been to as many as I can. I will do my best. I will do better. Thank you. Yeah.
So true.
Any further?
Okay.
Okay, maybe maybe I say something. I think once again, thanks all of you guests to come over these 2 days. And I indeed learned a lot. And so I don't think I have any clever, wise, smart things to say. But I guess in the end, let me just say a few things that kind of remind me, okay, in one sense, if I'm frank, I would have to say a lot of the questions, a lot of the things that have been discussed in the past 2 days are not exactly new to me. I've known all of the questions and comments and criticisms even back in my days as a PhD student. It's just a matter of, when you get to become a faculty member, you apply for grants, you write papers and ask silly questions and get silly answers and then, publish silly works. And I think 3 things I want to just some random final comments. One is, by the way, I was just kidding when I say how much money we get. I think we do have, not exactly money, but obviously we have some institutional resources. It's not exactly money. Sometimes it can be just resource. For example, at CUHK we have a survey center, right, headed by Professor Louis Leung. And for example, a couple of years ago, I was approached by a political scientist in Taiwan, and he also had he was also in charge of a survey center in his institution. And then we collaborated on some studies. And sometimes you just put together not exactly money, but just ready-at-hand institutional resources. And I think the idea of turning the C Center as a hub, I think actually I agree with that. So there was just a joking line that I said. The other thing that the discussion reminds me is, by the way, actually goes back to Colin's comment in the opening panel, how messy the world is. And in fact, the world is actually getting messier and messier and messier. Say, for example, social media is also go back to Ingrid's point about object of study. In one sense, even before we talk about unit of analysis, it's basically a matter of object of analysis, what you're really analyzing, and it's getting so messier these days. Like yesterday, Professor Michael Chan was talking about that project on social media, and actually the term social media, I never understand it, I have to say. And to tell you some dirty little secrets about that project, we, of course, asked questions about how, as Michael said, what are the most frequently used social media you use. Now, my everyday life understanding is that on my cell phone, I have WhatsApps, I have Line, which my understanding is the Taiwan version of WhatsApps, and I have WeChat, which to my understanding is kind of the mainland version of WhatsApps. And the thing is, in the Taiwan survey, some people mention Line. In the China part of the survey, a lot of people mention WeChat. In the Hong Kong survey, no one mentions WhatsApp, even though everyone is basically using it. So basically, even if you put forward a question like, what are the most frequently used social media? Okay, the object itself is so messy and understood so differently by ordinary people in different places. And so basically, I totally agree with Ingrid on the fundamental question is, what exactly are we studying? Okay, if we say we study social media, what actually is it? If we study city, what actually is it? If we study events and movements, what actually are they in this world? And I think this is not just a matter of comparative studies, actually, as Miria said, it's basically a communication, go back to the broader, it's a problem for communication study. Before these 2 days conference, we actually also held a Chinese language workshop on communication education, the future of communication education in the era. And basically, for those 2 days, the participants were also asking all these fundamental what questions. What is journalism these days? What is media these days? Okay, it's just, everything is like changing. And so basically, I agree that we have to restart from that, how to think about the objects of study. And that's one thought that I have. And the third thing, the final thing that I want to share is just my personal feeling is that sometimes some of the discussions also remind me, it's just for me, myself, it's a personal sharing, is to remind me the need to prevent stopping at easy answer. And what I mean is this. What I mean is we discussed the quantitative qualitative research method, and sometimes the easy answer is, of course, we need to use both. And then very few people would actually move on to then how. And you know, we talk about unit of analysis as going beyond the nation. The easy answer is nation is of course still important, but we need to go beyond that and find other units of analysis. But it's an easy answer, and it can kind of, you know, stop debate from turning into a fight at a conference. But then what? Okay, how many of us really would really move forward after getting that easy answer? And because I was, I remember that I read, when I was a graduate student, read Richard Rorty's Philosophy of Social Hope, and there was, he used the term conversation stopper. And you know, sometimes in some, even in academic conversations, you know, sometimes there can be conversation stoppers and easy answers that are put forward to kind of, you know, sometimes we need that, of course. You know, in Chinese, usually when we need to calm down a little bit, we say, drink your tea, okay, 飲茶, okay, okay. But then what's the next step? And obviously, you know, I of course, you know, those big and fundamental questions, I think, would not be resolved in a two-day conference. Actually, this afternoon, one of the officer, EO, just a staff, administrative staff, came to me and asked me, oh, you know, Francis, I'm really interested. What kind of achievement, or have you really discussed something really real these 2 days? Because she's not a researcher, right? And so she was around, and she had no idea whatsoever what we are talking about. And so, but because she was the person in charge of drafting the conference grant proposal, when we submit the conference grant proposal to the university. So she was writing all those, you know, what we aim to achieve, blah, 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 okay. And then she said, oh, did you actually do that? And I said, and I told her, frankly, of course not. Of course not, because, well, you know, those kind of things you put down in a conference grant proposal are questions that are never going to be resolved. Or those are the aims that you are really high aims that you really want to achieve. But it's like I guess, you know, in philosophy, if you ask the question, what's the meaning of life, and you put together a group of people, you are not going to resolve that forever, probably. So, but I guess, you know, I'm very, very glad, and really, again, thank you all for coming. And I think, you know, after all, the conversation has to go on. I think it's the deliberation has to go on, and I hope that, you know, in tonight's dinner and in the future, via all kinds of channels, we will have the chance to really continue our conversations and deliberations. And thank you. And
yeah, I think, you know, we'll keep the conversation going, and also, you know, our career going. And, you know, just to meet with the challenge that Bill has set for, you know. Now, is there any conclusion? Probably not, okay. Is there some point of concern? Yes, okay. I think, you know, in that regard, okay, let me try the impossible job, okay. Come up with several keywords, okay. And of course, you know, they can be criticized for being, you know, fussy, you know, you do not know what it refers to. What are the future directions of comparative communication, you know, as we see it, as I heard from you, okay? This are not make up, you know, beforehand. I, you know, hear some of these words from you. Some of them are, we talk about in depth, okay? Some of them are just mentioned more or less in passing, you know. Some of the debates has to do with the methods, you know, the logic of comparison. One is, you know, can we say if there is a new direction, is go beyond quantitative. Now, of course, we want to use both, okay? But the thing is, the state of the art is more in a quantitative fashion for the good reasons. It is difficult to compare qualitatively, But the thing is, with the most influential work by Holland and Mazzini, now it is qualitative. It is historical. This is rather ironic, And it makes a lot of the impact on the field. People can criticize it, but that is the case. Now, the question is, how come it becomes so influential? I think it has probably something to do with the model that they come up with. And then you can criticize it, for not being a good model, But the thing is, they try to be theoretical and then try to explain the formation of the media system in Europe and the West. So if the current state, first of all, is it possible to do comparative study qualitatively? Okay? Now, that is a question. If it is possible, then probably there can be more studies in this area because the state of the art is lopsided in favor of quantitative study for all the good reasons. The second one is, in terms of the unit of analysis, I think, it is the tradition for the field to go nation state, that is obvious because of the influence, and so on. But given the fact that, the social reality is being transformed, maybe, the boundary of nation state, yes, still there, very influential, but the thing is, the site of observation may have been changed as well, or moving. Now, in that regard, can we say go beyond the nation state? But it does not mean that the nation state, is no longer there, But, can we say go beyond it? Is it possible? And then it may get back to the question, even if you look at the graffitis, has it something to do with the nation state? Or, in Tom's studies, they try to build in all these organizational factors and then contextual factors. Now, how these contextual factors relate to the nation state, Maybe it is a way to factor in, the factors of different levels into the equation which you are studying. So is it possible to say go beyond the nation state? And the other one is we spend quite a bit of time talking about resource, okay, money and funding. I think they are genuine concerns. In fact, without the resource, you don't go anywhere. And so in that regard, well, we heard of the good example that Colin mentioned, okay? If you are in India, probably it applies over there very well too. In Chinese cultures, the students can be really good resources. It may work both ways, okay? It is not necessarily a question of exploitation, but or you can say that they didn't learn it in the same way, but it is culture, or whether you like it or not, that's culture. In our case, in Hong Kong, we always pay the students to do anything. Okay?
But not pay very well.
Okay, they survive. Okay. Now, so the question is, so can we say go resourceful? Because in the case of Michael, it is almost out of nothing. It is the acquaintance, the network that matters. So mobilize whatever we have, and I think it is more feasible to do comparative studies nowadays, even for you as a student. And also, maybe this word is loose to you, and that is go networking. The ideas about having conferences and then mailing list, and then on a platform in different regions, connections, in periodically. Now, so this would bring together, in fact, this may work out as a springboard to another network. We don't know. It is not matter out of design, but we learn from our experience that network really grows and evolves. And the other one is go comparative, but with a good reason. That in our case, probably compare, but only if you have a theoretical question. And then that would go back to the idea of having a typology, having a random sample of the world. It depends on what purpose that you are working at. I still remember Eurocast engaging in the broadcasting in the third world. And then what they try to do is have a typology of the world's third world countries. And then out of those third world countries, then they pick one as a part of, as a unit out of a cell. And then because the typology is structured in such a way that they can compare this unit with that unit, in order to provide some kind of explanation, Again, because they have this theoretical question behind it, then they can do so. Finally, is the idea about equivalent, the comparison, maybe go equivalent at a certain level of analysis. And, I think this is basic. And then this is nothing new, And, whenever we talk about a comparative logic, we will return the point of whether things are equivalent or not. This is on my list. And I think, this list would create another round of controversy, debates, But, this is what I get out of this roundtable. And any more wants to add to it? Yes.
Something totally different, but could we have a round of applause for these wonderful student assistants that have worked so hard during these days, and particularly the timekeepers. I was really impressed that even when their own supervisor was talking, they had the courage to say, no, stop. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mandy, Ivy, and a group of graduate students that have been helping us. They are really wonderful supporters. Bingo. Yeah.
Anthony, do you want to? No. Do you want to say a couple of? Okay.
Yeah, and then finally, please reserve the first right of publication, for us, because we are planning to have a publication, maybe, you can say something more about this?
Really, do we have a plan? Anyway, we have some rough ideas. By the way, we in some previous email exchanges we might have talked to some individuals, but not everyone. We do have some rough publication plans. And actually, even in the past when we organized international conference, we aim at turning it into an edited volume. So as Joseph has just said, we hope that you could give your paper, the first right of publication, so to speak, to us. Of course, we perfect understand if you have other plans. We are, of course, totally fine. But in case that you have other plans with your publication, we can still discuss individually whether you would have time and interest to write something different for the book volume that we are planning. So that is the rough idea. We will be contacting each one of you shortly after the conference, maybe sometime in late February, so on. Yeah. So that's the
Yes, Clement.
Just one idea. I think in the planned book, which we might want to think of having a chapter, the last chapter, summarizing these roundtable discussions, so that some good ideas can be published. So and if we all agree, then that saves you some time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good idea. Okay, if not, then thank you very much, for coming, and enjoy Hong Kong. If you have any questions, then talk to us, and Mandy and everyone.
Yes, thank you.